Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. On behalf of the 2021 Council, I'd like to thank you for joining us online today for our 131st Annual General Meeting. This is the second year, as we all know, that we're holding a virtual event, and we are really looking forward to today. I'm Susan Spiegel, and I'm pleased to be joining you as the 2021 President of the Ontario Association of Architects. I hope that you were able to see the names of all our newly licensed members scrolling across the screen as you were tuning in today. We are so very proud of all these individuals and congratulate them on achieving their license. Each of us can appreciate all the hard work and dedication that goes into this milestone. So please welcome to our profession. To begin today's meeting, I just want to say before I start into the traditional land acknowledgement that this is to be a 2-hour meeting, and I understand that we're all so chatty that it might go over half an hour. So if you've got a 4 o'clock meeting, you might want to push it if you want to stay to the very end. But to begin today's meeting, I would like to take a few moments to recognize the traditional lands on which we individually and collectively find ourselves. We are coming together today from different geographical locations and are participating from our homes and offices, and all located on the various traditional lands of Indigenous territories on this continent known as Turtle Island. So everybody, please take a moment to reflect on and recognize the significance of these territories to Indigenous people and our mutual obligations to respect and share these lands. I want to note that June is National Indigenous History Month, and it's a time to recognize and learn about history, heritage, and diversity of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples in Canada. The OAA has been committed to this learning, offering education, training opportunities to members and staff, establishing working groups and roundtables to build better pathways to decolonize the profession. In the wake of the recent and heartbreaking discovery of the remains of 215 children at the Kamloops Residential School, we are reminded of the urgency to fulfill the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's 94 calls to action, which detail how to redress the legacy of residential schools and advance the process of Canadian reconciliation. As an expression of our commitment to truth and reconciliation, I invite you all to read them and learn more about how to act in solidarity and support for survivors, their families, and their communities. The calls to action, along with a number of other key reports, you can find it in the chat at nctr.ca/records/reports. It is in our chat, so please avail yourself to that information. And now I would like to take a moment to recognize the members of our 2021 Council. A new member to Council, Farida Abubakare, has been invaluable in her contributions and insight as Chair of the Interns Committee and a member of the newly formed OEA Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity and Truth and Reconciliation Report Recommendations Working Group. Farida also serves on the Communications Committee and the Comprehensive Education Committee. Bill Birdsall is a veteran to past councils, and he's also a past president. Bill continues to support the Grand Valley, London, and Niagara Societies as council liaison and chair of the Fees Mediation Committee. He's currently serving on the Communications Committee, the OAAS Board, and the Public Interest Review Committee. I am pleased to introduce Council's interim architect representative for 2021, Heather Breeze. Heather has been busy with the Interns Committee this year and its new initiatives. Heather is also involved in the Comprehensive Education Committee and brings insight from the intern architect's perspective to current initiatives raised at the council table. Donald Chen is one of our 4 appointed Lieutenant Governor and Council members. Donald is serving on complaints as well as the Audit Committee to ensure the important public perspective is represented. Councillor Barry Klein has been a long-serving councillor going back several decades and has recently returned to council for this current term. Barry is serving on the OA's Public Interest Review Committee and the Fees Mediation Committee. Gord Erskine has been an insightful member of council and an important member of the Building Committee, the Budget Committee, Complaints Committee, the OAA Arito Joint Task Group, and the newly established OAA Technology Program Review Working Group, as well as liaison to the Ottawa Society of Architects. Our Vice President Regulatory, Paul Hastings, has returned to council last year after having served a number of years ago. This year, Paul was re-elected Vice President and serves as Chair of the Discipline, ERC, and Registration Committees. Jennifer King is a licensed technologist OAA serving on council. Jennifer has been integral in raising awareness and increasing the involvement of licensed technologists OAA and currently serves as an integral member of the OAA Technology Program Review Working Group. She was elected to serve as Vice President of Communications this year, where she was instrumental in helping with the virtual conference week. Jen is also on the OAAA's Board of Directors and serves as the liaison to Northwestern Ontario Society of Architects. Our Vice President Education, Natasha Cricken, has embraced her role in this important portfolio created in 2020. Natasha is responsible for chairing the Comprehensive Education Committee and is also a member of the Interns Committee. She was also one of the driving forces behind this year's virtual conference week. Immediate past President Kathleen Curtin has just completed a 2-year term as president, where equity, diversity, and inclusion were central to her tenure. Katie's a member of the recently established Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and Truth and Reconciliation Report Recommendations Working Group, the Building Committee, and the OAA Technology Program Review Working Group. She sits on the Pro-Dem board and is chair of the Governance Committee while filling the rest of her time as liaison to the Toronto Society of Architects. Jeffrey LaBerge is currently serving on the Comprehensive Education Committee and Governance Committee and is the Ontario's representative to the National Committee for the Examination for Architects in Canada and was a key participant in the creation of the first online examination. He also serves as the council liaison to the Algoma North Bay and Northern Ontario Societies of Architects. We were excited with the reappointment last year of the Lieutenant Governor and Council appointee, Michelle Langlade. Michelle also serves as a member of the Discipline Committee and Governance Committee. Our Senior Vice President and Treasurer, Agata Mancini, has had a busy schedule this year with the oversight of the OA's finances and serving on the Audit Committee and Budget Committee. She is also invaluable in helping plan this year's virtual conference week. Agata also serves on the OAA Arito Joint Task Group and is the liaison to the Hamilton and Burlington Society of Architects. Embracing her role as new member to council, Laura McKendrick is serving on the Budget Committee, Complaints Committee, and the Subcommittee on Building Codes and Regulations, aka SCOBCAR. Laura is also the council liaison to the St. Lawrence Society of Architects. Long-serving LGIC appointee Elaine Mintz's great passion for the profession is reflected in her work on numerous groups, including the Communications Committee, the Discipline Committee, the Governance Committee, the Public Interest Review Committee, and the OAA Technology Program Review Working Group. We are happy to welcome Dio Paquette, who is new to council this year and currently involved in the Building Committee, the Practice Resources Committee, Experience Requirements Committee, and the Registration Committee. A new member to council, our Vice President of Strategic, Christiana Schumann, is currently chair of the Sustainable Built Environments Committee, or SBEC, and PACT, the Policy Advocacy Coordination Team. Christiana is also a member of the OAA OGCA Best Practices Committee and serves as the OAA's representative to the Construction and Design Alliance Ontario. Lieutenant Governor and Council appointee Gagan Singh was appointed member to Council last year. Gagan is involved in the regulatory side of the OEA as a member of the Discipline Committee and as our Complaints Review Counselor. Gagan also sits on the newly formed Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity and Truth and Reconciliation Report Recommendations Working Group. Andy Thompson is a very passionate member of council who was instrumental in orchestrating this year's conference plenary panel. Andy is currently serving as a member of the Sustainable Built Environments Committee, the Building Committee, and the OAA OGCA Best Practices Committee. And finally, our Vice President Practice, Settimo Velarde. Set currently chairs the Practice Resource Committee and the OAA Subcommittee on Building Codes and Regulations, and serves as a member of the Pro-Dem Board. Set is also involved in PACT, the Practice Review Committee, and the OAA OGCA Best Practices Committee, and acts as the council liaison to the Windsor Society of Architects. It is important to recognize these individuals and the tremendous work that they put in as members of OAA Council. There are many committees and working groups that carry out the work of the OAA, and each of these people work very hard to help support the membership in their voluntary role on council. Thank you to our councillors for their contributions to the profession. I would also like to take this time to recognize and thank our staff at the OAA. I've had an opportunity to work closely with these wonderful people for a number of years, and would like to extend our appreciation to them for their service and dedication. Sorry, should I do the whole thing again because no one heard me? Yes, apologies. Okay, well, that's the first faux pas, which will increase the length of this meeting. I will now call this meeting to order. No amendments to the agenda have been identified, and therefore the agenda today will stand as circulated. Please note that the formal procedures for this meeting were circulated to the membership in electronic mailing on May 14th, 2021. I hope everyone's had a chance to review the procedures in advance of this meeting. At this point, I would like to ask the OAA Executive Director, Christy Doyle, to review these procedures, as well as a few housekeeping items for the meeting today.
Full set of procedures for this meeting were distributed to all members along with the official notice and agenda on May 14th. It is hoped that everyone has had the chance to review those procedures. I will not read them verbatim. However, I will make note of a few important points as follows. In accordance with the bylaws, members may not vote on matters that were not contained in the official agenda for the AGM. This means that motions or resolutions cannot be accepted during the meeting. We will, however, be pleased to receive thoughts and suggestions from the members under other business later on in the meeting. With respect to eligibility to vote on items during the meeting, all architects and licensed technologists OAA in good standing were directed to register no later than June 14th at 4:30 p.m. in order to be eligible to vote. The name of each voting member that registered is confirmed against the OAA's official register. The names on the final registration list for the AGM are also checked against the official proxy record. As a reminder, if a member deposited a proxy vote with the OAA, but also registered for the AGM, their proxy has automatically been withdrawn. Any other individuals, such as intern architects, life members, retired members, honorary members, student associates, and invited guests are not permitted to vote on matters before the AGM. These individuals will not have the option to vote shown on their screen when the vote is called. The president holds the official proxy record, and proxy votes have been automatically registered with the individual member holding them, and therefore their voting capabilities have been weighted accordingly. When the president calls the vote on a motion, please choose one of the three options shown on the poll: approve, object, or abstain.
As the motion is raised, you will click on the corresponding button with that motion. A new tab will open with this motion and the voting options. Please select your preferred response. To cast your vote, please click on the orange Submit button. Once submitted, a confirmation will confirm your vote has been received. Please close this tab to return to the main stage.
As always, voting will be conducted on the premise of honor and integrity of the individual. Notwithstanding, the virtual meeting has been set up such that only voting members that have registered within the prescribed time frame will in fact have the option to vote. All other meeting attendees should not attempt to cast a vote in any manner. The results of each vote will be tabulated in real time by the virtual platform, and I will announce the results before moving on to the next item of business. The proceedings of this AGM are being recorded and then transcribed verbatim. If you wish to raise a question during the meeting, please use the Ask a Question function that is available along the bottom of your screen. If you enter a question, please ensure that you include your full name. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please use the chat function. Thank you again for joining us, and I will now return the floor to President Spiegel.
Thank you, Christy. I would now like to move on to the next item on the agenda. The next item of business on our agenda is to recognize those among us who've been members of the OAA for more than 50 years. This is such a remarkable achievement. We are very pleased today to recognize this special group. We would like to take a moment during our meeting to read a brief bio for each individual and share some photos that have been personally selected by each of the longstanding members. Our first member of longstanding is Philip H. Carter. Philip Carter graduated from the University of Manitoba in 1964 and from the University of Pennsylvania 2 years later with a Master's of Architecture and City Planning degrees. He joined Parkins Architect and Allward and Guinlock Architects before establishing his own firm in 1972, which would become Philip H. Carter Architect. While he completed numerous residential projects, his practice is best known for libraries, such as the Markham Community Library and Village Green, which won the Governor General's Medal. Other memorable projects include Witchwood Library, Lillian H. Smith Library, Barbara Frum Library, and Malvern Library. Phil was an assistant professor at the University of Toronto from 1968 to 1975, and also taught at University of Waterloo, Ryerson, and OCAD. He's been involved both professionally and as a citizen in numerous heritage projects, and is an active member and past president of the Port Hope chapter of the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, from whom he recently received a Lifetime Achievement Award. Phil currently resides in Toronto and Port Hope with his wife, Sheila Fletcher, an interior designer responsible for most of the interiors of his library projects. Next, the OAA would like to recognize Stephen J.S. Cheng. Stephen Cheng continues to have a discovery-rich life within the pursuits of architecture, landscape architecture, and urban design. He was educated at the University of Manitoba and Harvard, and has been a member of the OAA, AIBC, RIBA, and AOLA. Stephen has worked at his own practice in the private sector and in municipal, provincial, and federal governments throughout his career. His projects have included sports facilities and arenas, offices, homes, and penitentiaries. While working in Singapore, Stephen discovered the challenge of integrating traditional Chinese historical design thinking into modern day designs. He says he believes Ontario is a place where people from East and West come to settle, and is certain the rich results of design interaction will come from his world-class colleagues in the Ontario Association of Architects. The next individual, Malcolm A. Freeman, was born in Chesterfield, England, but made Canada his home. During his youth, he became interested in architecture and was fortunate enough to work in several practices during school holidays. While at university, he worked on a construction site as an assistant to a site engineer on a multi-story concrete building. After graduating from Nottingham University School of Architecture, Malcolm spent some time traveling around Europe, eventually moving to Canada in 1965. As a new immigrant, he gained experience working in several smaller practices where he was exposed to many of the differing aspects of practice in Canada. Malcolm entered a joint practice with Jerry Mason, a civil engineer, with whom he has had the opportunity to work on many different building forms that evolved over time. This work includes small residential projects, combined industrial office developments, tenant improvements, building repair and renovations, nonprofit housing projects, as well as commercial and municipal work. Malcolm finds running his own practice to be very rewarding and fulfilling experience. He has tried his best to avoid compulsory retirement and has been fortunate enough to be able to continue his profession to this day. Malcolm wishes to thank the OAA for this recognition, as well as the opportunities to develop his career here in Ontario. Next, the OAA would like to recognize David R.M. Johnston. David Johnston graduated from the University of Toronto with a Bachelor of Architecture degree in 1967. 3 years later, he established his own private practice and continues his architectural practice with 2 staff members in Markham, Ontario. He wishes to thank his first employer, George Yamazaki Architect, his second employer, George Gregg Architect, and architect Frank Nickel for their guidance and support. He also thanks the OAA for its assistance over the last 50 years. Our next member of longstanding is David K. Mesber. David Mesber received his Bachelor of Architecture from the University of Manitoba in 1966, followed by a Master of Architecture from the University of Toronto 3 years later. Through job opportunities with 3 of Ontario's preeminent urban planning firms, James A. Murray, Proctor and Redfern Limited, and as a partner with John Boosfield Associates between 1966 and 1978, he gained valuable expertise in planning and urban design, including the planning of new towns in Ontario, such as Erin Mills and Orleans. In 1978, David launched his own practice, specializing in housing and urban planning. In 1983, through a serendipitous chain of events, David entered into an exclusive arrangement with Cineplex Odeon Corporation to spearhead the design of its rapidly expanding chain of cinemas in North America and Britain, an association that extended through 1990. In 1992, the partnership with Harold Smith, the firm expanded its expertise in cinema design and has subsequently completed more than 500 cinema projects in 53 countries. Since 1983, David has been a leading innovator in multiplex cinema design, incorporating creative planning and design strategies sensitive to clients' visions, responding to diverse cultural and geographical contexts. These include new projects, conversions of single-screen theaters into multiplexes, and the adaptive reuse of cinema buildings into performing arts venues. David's historic restorations of old movie palaces were recognized by awards for architectural preservation, which included Pantages in Toronto and Showcase in LA, as well as design for the Universal City in LA. David retired from practice in 2021, happy to have brought the magic of the cinema experience to the world. Finally, David has been generous in providing us with a pre-recorded speech, which we would like to share now.
I would like to thank the OAA for recognizing me as a member of longstanding. It's hard to believe I've been registered for 50 years. Growing up in Regina, Saskatchewan, I wanted to be an architect since I was 8 years old. I'm fortunate to have had mentors who profoundly impacted my career. Regina architect Dan Stock hired me for my first summer placement while at the University of Manitoba. Another summer placement with James A. Murray in Toronto led to a permanent job following graduation. It was Jim Murray who persuaded me to pursue my master's degree at University of Toronto. At Proctor and Redfern, I met John Bousfield, whose vision and expertise in urban planning taught me the value of multidisciplinary collaboration. These experiences shaped my own commitment to mentor young aspiring architects through high school and university co-op placements and to hire new grads and architects from other countries. I'm happy that the OAA includes mentoring as part of the internship program. In mid-career, an unexpected opportunity arose with Cineplex Odeon to design multiplex cinemas across North America and Britain and restore and repurpose historic theaters and cinemas. A highlight for me was the restoration of the Pantages, now the Ed Mirvish Theatre, in Toronto. The Cineplex Odeon Art Commission program enabled 51 Canadian artists to create major works of art for permanent installations in cinemas, another opportunity for me to work collaboratively across disciplines. Since then, I've specialized in cinema design, working in 53 countries. It has been challenging and rewarding to adapt my design philosophy to embrace different cultures, languages, geography, climate, and economies. Within this diversity, I've learned that one thing is universal: everyone loves the movies.
Next, we would like to recognize Marcus Scholar. In 1965, shortly after completing his education at McGill, Marcus Scholar joined the OAQ and established his own practice in Montreal. He joined with two architects in 1970 to form the partnership of Reich, Schertzer, and Scholar. That same year, he joined the OAA. The success of the firm enabled Marcus to open a Toronto office of Reich, Schertzer, Scholar, and Gluck in 1977. 3 years later, Marcus and Thomas Gluck formed a new partnership of Scholar and Gluck Architects. In 1994, he formed the partnership of Scholar, Lee and Associate Architects, Inc., and is now a senior partner at Scholar, Lee, Borenstein and Associate Architects, Inc., which was formed in 2018. Marcus's commissions included power and manufacturing plants, warehouse facilities, warehouses, shopping centers, and office developments. His projects are located in most Canadian provinces, as well as in the United States. He has also designed a hydroelectric project in Malaysia and prepared preliminary drawings for Parliament buildings in Nigeria. Marcus is particularly proud of having received the International Council of Shopping Centre Gold Medal in 2018 for the Leaside Village. A member of Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Quebec, Nova Scotia, PEI, New York State, and Florida Architectural Associations, at the age of 82, he continues to practice. Finally, Marcus would like to share a few words with us in the form of a pre-recorded speech, which we would like to share now.
Hi, my name is Mark Scholar. I graduated from McGill University in 1963, and I joined the PQAA, which is the Quebec Association of Architects, 1 year after that. My work at that time was restricted to basements, kitchens, and the odd toilet renovation. They were fun, and I look back on them very fondly. Boy, nevertheless, out of all that stuff, I look back in the profession and say, boy, has the profession ever changed. My old boss, my original boss, when he did a set of working drawings, he included site work, he included plumbing, he included electrical, and maybe a couple of other disciplines that we don't even look at today. Wow, it's too bad that we gave that all away, but that's the way the ball bounces. At that time, permitting was a piece of pie. We got it in 2 weeks. Site review was restricted to the work that we did with our engineers. Nobody else showed up. If we were lucky, sometimes we were able to say hello to an inspector from the city. No longer like that. Economically, the profession has really been a roller coaster ride, as you're well aware. It's gone up, it's gone down, it's been all over the place. However, we're lucky. Our profession is really very diverse. What other profession has the opportunity to fiddle and fool around and sketch on a computer in the morning, do comprehensive working drawings in the afternoon, argue with the city about permit interpretation, and also convince our client that his lawyer should not fiddle around with the DC contracting because most of them don't know anything about construction. And in addition, on a nice shiny day, we can get into our car, zoom out to the site, and admire the beautiful work that we've carried out. We're lucky. I gotta point out that, you all know that when you talk about real estate, everybody says location, location, location. In architecture, it's more negotiation, negotiation, negotiation. We start a project, the first thing naturally, we're negotiating with our client. We're charging too much. Why is it so much? Finally, that's done. Then we start negotiating with the city for site plan approval and permits. We negotiate, finally work that one out. Now the construction starts. We have to start negotiating with the contractor relative to their draws and change orders. This goes on. After all is said and done and the project is finished, who do we have to negotiate with? With the client to get our final payment. I'm sure most of you have encountered that lovely process. But I must tell you, notwithstanding all the following, my career has been a lot of fun and quite enjoyable. I've been blessed with good clients, wonderful partners and associates, and a series of very, very rewarding projects. I sure hope I can continue doing this for at least another 10 years before I retire, and I hope that all of you have as rewarding and fulfilling career as I have. Thanks for letting me talk to you.
Next, the OAA would like to recognize James C. Strassman. Jim Strassman is an accomplished Canadian architect, winner of the RAIC Gold Medal, founding principal for Strassman Architects, and a fellow of the RAIC. For more than 50 years, he's been recognized by both his clients and peers for his collaborative approach, innovative design, and award-winning projects. Jim graduated from UBC in 1962 with his degree in architecture. After leaving school, he and his wife, May, drove across Canada in their 1954 Willys Aero to Montreal. Jim and May stayed in Montreal for 2 years, fascinated by the exciting architectural landscape and activity of the new subway system construction and the planning for the upcoming Expo 67. While working with Victor Pruz, Jim worked on the design for 2 new subway stations, Metro Montreal and Metro Bonaventure, as well as getting involved with early master planning and the stadium design for Expo 67. In 1964, Jim and May left Montreal and sailed for Europe. In Wolfsburg, Germany, he bought a little red Volkswagen 1500 station wagon and crossed the Alps and ended up in the beautiful small town of Lugano, Switzerland. While there, Jim worked with Guido Barella, designing an orphanage and an alpine chapel in the village of Kari. On returning to Canada in 1965, Jim joined Erickson Massey in Vancouver, where he worked on projects such as the Macmillan Bloedel Building and the BC Pavilion for the Expo 70 in Osaka, Japan. By 1969, Jim and May had relocated to Toronto, where Jim opened the Toronto office of Arthur Erickson Architects as the principal in charge of design. While leading the Toronto office, Jim led the design of the new Bank of Canada building in Ottawa and both the Eglinton West and Yorkdale subway stations on the new Spadina subway line. Jim founded Strassman Architects in 1976. The firm's very first commission, the Wandage Cottage, won many awards, including the RAC Gold Medal and international acclaim. Building on that success, Strassman Architects continued to grow. Over more than 40 years, has established an enviable reputation as a leading design firm in the fields of transit, industrial, commercial, residential, master planning, and custom house design. After 50 years of practice as an OAA member, Jim is still very much an active part of his practice and the architectural community in Ontario. With his partners at SAI, Sean and Liz Strassman, Jim's son and daughter-in-law, and Richard Shaw, Jim continues to design unique and creative projects that are focused on being buildable, affordable, and sustainable. Now that he has reached this milestone, rather than slow down, he's planning which goals he will accomplish in the next 50 years. And finally, the OAA would like to recognize James M. Wright. Jamie Wright was in the third class to graduate from Dalhousie University's New School of Architecture in 1967. He went on to join Jerry Markham's office in Toronto and then opened his own firm in 1974. 6 years later, Jamie established Young and Wright Architects with Richard Young and grew the firm to 120 people with offices in Toronto and Vancouver before merging with IBI Group Architects in 2008, where he was a director until retiring in 2018. Jamie opened IBI's office in Halifax in 2012 and was in charge of the Nova Centre and the 1 million square foot mixed-use project that included the new Halifax Convention Centre, 2 office buildings, and a hotel that has helped revitalize the city's historic central core. Jamie served as the president of the OAA in 1987, director of the Design Exchange, the Toronto Home Builders, Rosedale Moordale House, and Pro-Dem Insurance Company. He has sat on U of T's Faculty Council for the School of Architecture, chaired the fundraising committee for Dalhousie's School of Architecture, and was a member of the City of Mississauga's Urban Design Committee. A fellow of the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada since 1989, he received the OAA's Order of Da Vinci Award in 2010. His projects have also received many design awards, including 2 Governor General's awards. Jamie has a lifelong interest in master planning and residential design, which he feels have the greatest impact on the lives of most people. He credits several significant mentors early on and has had the good fortune of working with a range of talented Canadian and international architects that have greatly enriched his career. Again, thank you and congratulations to these individuals for their perseverance, dedication, and long-standing contribution to our profession. As part of recognizing their achievement, a framed certificate of recognition has been prepared and will be sent to each member of long-standing. The next item of business is appreciation to OAA counselors who've recently completed their term on council. Volunteers are absolutely vital to the work that the OAA does. I would like to ask OAA Executive Director Christy Doyle to read the citations.
Thank you again, Susan, and good afternoon again to everyone. To begin our appreciation, I would like to recognize the contribution of Don Ardeal. Don, in fact, served 2 separate terms on our council, and it is my pleasure to extend our thanks once again to him. During Don's time on council, his dedication was evident, and he provided valuable insight and experience and expertise in the areas of education and project management. Don shared his vast experience and knowledge beyond the council table while serving on the Complaints Committee, Experience Requirements Committee, and also as a member of the OAAS Board of Directors. I would be remiss if I did not also at this time acknowledge Don's incredible contribution and role in the renewal of the Canadian Handbook of Practice. On behalf of myself and council, thank you, Don, and we wish you all the best. Next, we would like to recognize Amir Azadeh. Amir certainly made a significant impact on the association and on the profession while serving on council. Amir was always passionate, innovative, and proactive when it came to issues that were in front of council. This was particularly so in the areas of communication as well as membership engagement. Amir served as Vice President Communications, during which time he spearheaded the completion of the OAA website and logo redesign projects. He saw them through to the end and to launch. Amir was key in augmenting the OAA's exposure through social media. On behalf of council, Amir, we would like to express our sincere appreciation and wish you well in your career. Next, we would like to recognize Jeremiah Gammond. Jeremiah was elected in 2018 to fill the newly established licensed technologist OAA seat on council. Prior to this, Jeremiah served for a number of years as the president of the OAAS, the OAA's technology program, and he continued to serve on its board as a council representative throughout his 3-year term. Jeremiah brought a very important perspective to the table as a licensed technologist OAA and ensured that the experiences and knowledge of this part of our licensed membership was always included. As a member of the Communications Committee, Jeremiah was instrumental in again bringing the lens of the licensed technologist OAA to those discussions, as well as furthering our goals for a more inclusive profession. On behalf of Council and the Association, we extend sincere appreciation to Jeremiah and wish him continued success. Next, I would like to recognize Milda Miskenite. Milda served as the OAA's intern representative on Council for 2020. Milda, like interns before her, has been a valuable member, contributing and enriching Council's discussion, providing fresh perspective on issues discussed and debated. Milda served on the Interns Committee and was key in the administration of the intern title survey, receiving feedback from the membership on a proposed change to the title of intern architect. On behalf of Council and the Association, we extend sincere appreciation to Milda and wish her well on her path to licensure. Next, please join me in recognizing Sarah Murray. Sarah served on Council for one term commencing in 2018. And while in some regards seemingly reserved in her approach, Sarah's contribution, insights, and feedback around the Council table spoke volumes. So much so, Sarah was appointed as an interlocking director to the Pro-Dem Board of Directors for 2 years and also served as Council representative to the OAAAS and on the OAA's Complaints Committee. We'd like to take this opportunity to extend sincere appreciation to Sarah and wish her all the best. Finally, we would like to recognize David Rich. David served an incredible 3 consecutive terms on Council, first elected in 2012. David spent a considerable amount of time as a member of the Executive Committee, including as Vice President Regulatory and Vice President Strategic. David was thoughtful in his contributions at the Council table and very passionate about the practice of architecture and the path that leads one there. As a well-seasoned practitioner, David was able to bring a certain depth to the discussions that can only come from years of experience. Throughout his time on Council, David continually advocated for enhanced relations between the schools of architecture and the OAA. On behalf of myself and Council, we wish David all the success in the future. As part of recognizing the contribution of these individuals to Council, a framed certificate has been prepared and will be sent to each Council member. Thank you, and I will return the floor once again to Susan.
Thank you, Christy. It is with great sadness that I would ask the members at this point in the program to take a moment in silence to observe and recognize those members and past members who've passed away since our last meeting. Okay, thank you, everybody. Those were an amazing number of inspiring careers and people, volunteers, and people who have passed away. So let's just take a moment and just be inspired. So at this point, I would like to move to our formal business. The next item of business is confirmation of the synopsis of the minutes of the 130th Annual General Meeting held last year on August 6th, 2020. I will now ask if there are any questions pertaining to the synopsis, errors, or omissions, and we will pause for a minute to allow for any questions. Please use the Ask a Question function in your, I guess it's your chat. Time. So we should have a slide that shows motion number 1, which is acceptance of the synopsis of the minutes of the 130th meeting of the members. And B, it moves that the synopsis of the minutes of the 130th meeting held on August 6th, 2020 be accepted as circulated. I do have a mover and a seconder for the motion to accept the synopsis as circulated, a copy of which was sent to members again, say it again, from on May 14th, 2021. So this motion also appears on the screen and is noted by Christy at the outside of the meeting. And for purposes of efficiency, we have pre-arranged for movers and seconders in advance of the AGM for each of the motions that we will be voting on today. Christy?
Thank you, Susan. I'm happy to note that Sean O'Reilly from Lyle, Ontario has moved this motion, and it has been seconded by Don Reisenberg of Centralia.
I will now ask all members who are eligible to vote to cast their vote, and we will pause again for about a minute to allow time for these votes to be cast and calculated. How are we doing, Christy?
Susan, I'm just waiting for the vote poll to close. There's a slight delay, and then I'll be able to announce.
Okay, there's supposed to be music to accompany your voting.
I think, Susan, what happens is everybody else can hear the music, but we can't.
Oh, I hope so. Susan could try to sing.
I think that's the way it works.
I can sing, but you don't want to hear me. I have a karaoke machine, actually.
Susan, I now have the poll closed and happy to note that the motion has been passed.
Great. Okay, so the next item is business arising from the minutes. And I'm pleased to give you an update on where we are after the member's motion last year. In response to the motion that was passed at the 2020 AGM last year, OAA Council met in September. And after lengthy discussion capping off months of review, a motion was passed to immediately remove the requirement for licensed members to have a digital seal issued through Notarius. Previously, the Notarius digital seals had been mandatory for new applications as of January 2019 for both architects and licensed technologists OAA, and it would have been extended to all licensed members as of January 2022. With the mandatory requirement rescinded, both physical and digital OAA seals, as well as high-resolution seal images, can continue to be used at the member's discretion. So that is that. And the second part of the AGM motion focused specifically on enforcement of design requirements with building officials, something dear to all of our hearts. Earlier this year, OEA Council directed Executive Director Christy Doyle and our Registrar Christy Mills to report on activities already underway in this area and to explore additional actions to address this motion. The following was presented to Council earlier this year and subsequently communicated to the membership. The actions already underway include education resources for building officials, enforcement postings on the OAA website, and communicating with chief planners and chief building officials regarding professional design requirements. For chief building officials, a succinct document articulating the professional design and general review requirements as set out in the Architects Act has been prepared. The new document does not replace the joint OAA PEO bulletin setting out the requirements for professional design, but instead it complements that piece and focuses strictly on the information relative to the practice of architecture. Further, it integrates the scope of practice for an architect along with licensed technologists OAA. The new document explains that the new document explains what we enforce and helps building officials assess whether submitted applications and drawings may be the subject of illegal practice, allowing them to be better equipped to follow through with their responsibility under the Building Code Act to contact the OAA or deny the permit submission. The recent reset of the group Engineers, Architects, and Building Officials, or EABO, has also increased opportunity for communication between the OAA and building officials, specifically around the professional design requirements. This renewed alliance provides a direct avenue to share information with building officials and provide OAA backing for efforts by the organizations representing the building officials community. So earlier this year, the EABO agreed one of its priorities for 2021 would be ensuring authorized use of professional seals and tangentially to identify situations of illegal practice by other designers, as well as enforcement of professional design and general review requirements under the Architects Act and Professional Engineers Act. Additionally, the OAA has added specific and detailed information regarding its enforcement efforts and authority, as well as aggregate statistics on the OAA website and in e-newsletters. This serves as an additional resource and education tool for building officials and as well for the public and our membership. Given the use of Zoom and further acceptance of virtual meetings, the OAA is planning an educational session targeted directly at building officials, arranged and facilitated through the EABO, or specifically offered by the OBOA to its members as an education session. Finally, over the course of successive years, the OAA president has written to all CBOs and chief planners regarding the Act's requirements for engaging an architect at the outset of the site plan process when the building requires regulated professional design services. We will be updating and sending a similar letter later this year. So that is my report on those two items. And I am wondering if there is any other business arising from the minutes. And we will pause for a few moments here to allow for questions to be entered into the Ask a Question function. And I think we'll also have music while we're waiting. Thanks.
Susan,
Yes.
I do have one question that's come in. There is a member who's asked about the status of the OAA Arito initiative and the regulation of interior design under the Architects Act. We could address it now. We are speaking directly to the synopsis, so we can address it now, or we could do it at the end of the meeting.
I don't know. I'd be pretty happy just to do a little short summary, or Christy, you could. We have met with Arito and had very interesting conversations.
Sure. I'm happy to just give a quick little update.
Sure.
That project, I mean, we are continuing our work with Arito. We are continuing to develop the details of that model and of the regulation of interior design under the Architects Act. Unfortunately, I guess with respect to government, it's obviously a much slower discussion with them. As you can appreciate, the government has priorities related to COVID. So the last year for them, this has not been a priority on their plate. But again, we are continuing to work forward with it. And I don't see any other questions, Susan, in the chat. So I think we can probably move on.
Okay, there's many opportunities for questions, and any question that does not get answered in this particular forum will be responded to directly in our newsletter. So anybody who has a question afterwards that they forgot to ask, do not worry. There's always room for questions and room for answers. So our next slide should be about the appointment of the auditor. So the next item is the appointment of an auditor. We have a mover and a seconder for the motion to appoint Grant Thornton LPP as the auditors for the OAA. And the motion is now on the screen. So motion to appointment of the auditor for 2021, be it moved that the firm of Grant Thornton LPP Chartered Accountants be appointed as auditors for the Ontario Association of Architects for 2021. Christy?
And Susan, we have a mover elect from Toronto and seconded by Thea Carlaveras of Toronto.
Again, I will now ask all members who are eligible to vote to cast their vote, and we will pause again for a minute to allow time for the votes to be cast.
The poll has now been closed, Susan, and the motion has been accepted.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Christy. Our next slide is about honorary members. So just waiting to see if that's up. Okay. The next item is the appointment of for honorary membership. Honorary members are a class of persons whose interests are related to those of of the association as defined in Regulation 27 under the Architects Act as persons who have rendered to the architectural professional signal or valuable service or have scrupulously upheld the objects of the association. So this year, the following individuals have been nominated for honorary membership, and they are Michael Kopus, Wayne Medford, and Marta O'Brien. Congratulations. And the names of these individuals were contained in the official agenda emailed to members on May 14th. And I would like to recognize OEA past president Sheena Sharp, who will read the nomination for Michael Kopus.
Sheena Sharp, District of Toronto. Michael Kopus spent 5 years drawing maps at Toronto's assessment department before finding an architectural position at WZMH in 1968. In the next 16 years, Michael was exposed to building from the CN Tower to small-town nursing homes, to office buildings clad with precast concrete, to an art gallery in a very large log cabin. During this time, he found a passion for contract administration. In 1984, when DOS was brand new and laptop computers weighed 28 pounds, Michael was working on and launched StatsLog 1. In those early days, Dunlop Farrow, E&H, Parkin, and CS&P were early adopters and risked trusting a small software firm with their contract administration. These and other clients provided a continuous feedback loop for StatsLog to improve and support the profession. In 1989, StatsLog needed to be reorganized and refinanced with oversight, so a board of directors, mostly architects, was installed. Notably, the late Tom Tam of B&H was a big influence, and one of those board members. He, along with others, served in that role for 15 years. In 2015, a new board was installed, again mostly architects, and they continue to today. In 2020, StatsLog software has been in continuous use in the architectural community for over 35 years. By supporting their clients and administering over $10 billion worth of construction, Michael, for his part, in that same year, has been doing contract administration for 52 years. In contrast, large corporations providing architectural software barely seem to acknowledge the needs of their clients, let alone value them. Michael has had a unique vantage point of the profession in that he has talked to architects across the province and across the country regularly, spotting trends, warning of pitfalls, offering advice on the best possible practice. He has constantly studied new contracts and pertinent legislation to understand current practice. Michael has respect for architecture in its breadth and depth. He sees contract administration not as an end in itself, but as a key process in the realization of great buildings. I move that Michael Kopus be made an honorary member of the Ontario Association of Architects.
Thank you, Sheena, for reading the citation, and I'm happy to report that the motion has been seconded by Stephen Ginsburg of Toronto.
Okay. Motion 3, the election of honorary member Michael Kopus. Be it moved that Michael Kopus be elected honorary member of the Ontario Association of Architects. I will now ask all eligible members to cast their vote, and we will pause again for a minute to allow for the votes to be cast. We're going to vote for each one individually. So vote away.
Susan, the voting poll has now been closed and tabulated, and the motion has been accepted.
Wonderful. Congratulations, Michael. Next, I would like to recognize OAA past president Tone Dressen, who will read the nomination for Wayne Medford.
I, Tone Dreesen, hereby move that Wayne Medford be recognized as an honorary member of the Ontario Association of Architects. Over his career as a teacher, visual artist, and supporter of architecture, Wayne has been a tireless supporter of the profession. In serving 10 years on OAA Council as a Lieutenant Governor and Council appointee, Wayne has admirably served the public interest. In his decade of service and beyond, Wayne continues to advocate for the profession and the role of architecture in design. Wayne exemplifies the ideals of public service and advocacy for the profession. Wayne deserves the title of honorary OAA member as credibility for his ongoing role as an advocate, promoting the role of architecture in society.
Thank you so much, Tone. I'm happy to note that the motion to appoint Wayne Medford as an honorary member has been seconded by Vanessa Fong of Toronto.
A motion for election of honorary member Wayne Medford, be it moved that Wayne Medford be elected honorary member of the Ontario Association of Architects. And I will now ask eligible members to cast their vote. And we will pause and wait for Steve to give us the response.
Polling has been closed now for this motion, and the results have been tabulated. I'm happy to report that the motion has been accepted to nominate and make Wayne Medford an honorary member of the OAA.
Am I back on? That's okay. That's great. Congratulations, Wayne. Finally, I would like to recognize member and chair of the Toronto Society of Architects, Megan Torza, who will read the nomination for Marta O'Brien. Megan?
For the past 3 decades, Marta O'Brien's passion for architecture has driven a commitment both in her professional life and volunteer work to cultivate public appreciation of architecture through research and education. In particular, her passion to share the stories of her home city and province have greatly contributed to the public good, educating both the public and Ontario architects on the architectural history of our built environment and the people behind the buildings. Sharing her passion and knowledge, Marta has taught in both formal educational settings and community groups. She has taught numerous architectural history courses in schools across Toronto, including the University of Toronto's School of Continuing Education, Ryerson University, and George Brown. She has also taken her presentations outside formal educational institutions to historical societies, seniors learning organizations, libraries, and other cultural organizations with the goal of educating the broader public about the history and value of architecture. Between 2007 and 2014, Marta served as a volunteer member of the Heritage Toronto Board of Directors and has contributed to the Heritage Toronto's blog, another way of reaching thousands of Ontarians looking to learn more about our built environment. In 2006, Marta launched City Walks Tours and Talks, one of the few tour companies in Canada specializing in architectural tours and education. In addition to these personal pursuits, Marta played a pivotal role in the research and development of the Toronto Society of Architects Walking Tours program, a decade-long commitment to educating the public through volunteer-led tours. Marta's deep knowledge of Toronto's architectural history and tour delivery techniques were critical in shaping this initiative, and she spent countless weekends and evenings training our volunteer guides, many of them members of the profession. A decade later, and on the eve of her retirement from the TSA, our Walking Tours program is now one of the largest public outreach programs with over 1,000 tour attendees a year and 17 volunteer tour guides. The success of our program is a direct result of Marta's hard work and passion. In a province where our architectural history is often underrepresented and sometimes altogether forgotten, Marta's documentation and research of our built environment has contributed to the growing appreciation of Ontario's unique history and architectural legacy. More importantly, her passion to share her research and work with others, whether it be as lectures, talks, tours, or blog posts, has had profound effect on thousands of Ontarians and international visitors alike, who have been introduced to the work of dozens of Ontario architects, expanded their architectural knowledge, and learned more about the buildings and spaces in our province. I, Megan Torza of Toronto, move that Marta O'Brien be elected honorary member of the Ontario Association of Architects.
Thank you so much, Megan. I'd like to announce that the motion to appoint Marta O'Brien has been seconded by Daniel Gato of Coburg.
So Megan read the motion, so I will just ask all eligible members to cast their vote, and we will pause as Christy tabulates. Thank you.
Susan, the vote has been successfully completed and the motion is passed.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you very much to all our presenters, and congratulations to all our honorary members, the last of which is Marta O'Brien. So wonderful. That's fantastic, everybody. So our next item in our AGM and our 220 annual report, which was again made available by the OAA website on May 14th, 2021. I would now like to welcome our immediate past president, Kathleen Curtin, to take a few moments to speak to the 2020 annual report. Take it away, Katie.
Hello, everyone. Well, this has been a year I'm sure we will all remember. I'm equally sure that we are all much better at participating in online events than we were last year, but also certain that screen fatigue has become a reality we are all having to cope with. So I'm going to try and keep this brief. I would like to begin by sincerely thanking and acknowledging the hard work and determination of staff as they coped with yet another disruption in their work life. Staff had only recently begun to settle into their newly renovated workplaces when they were all dislocated once again in response to the pandemic. In spite of this, staff continued to support all of us under the leadership of the executive director and registrar. The pandemic was both traumatic and a major disruption. However, staff and council were resolute in providing continuous service to the membership while protecting the public interest and addressing our set priorities. Kudos to each and every one of you. The annual report details the OAA's progress through the last year, and I will leave it to each of you to refer to the copy that was attached to the announcement of this meeting. It can also be found on the OAA's website. The annual report continues to build upon the OAA's new virtual identity and focuses on the most important information. As the official summary of our profession's past year, we do want the content to be approachable and to ensure that all that transpired in 2020 is accessible to our membership. So let's look at the priorities Council set in 2020. In 2020, Council continued its commitment to the priorities established in 2019. The education continuum and membership engagement, and amplified the scope of diversity, equity, and inclusion by setting it as a lens that all work would be viewed through. In addition, Council formally added climate stability as a priority. For the past number of years, in fact, since before I joined Council, there had been an importance placed on climate stability, first by establishing the Sustainable Built Environment Committee, and then undertaking the building renovations that set the ambition of converting our headquarters into a net zero building. Fortunately, these priorities had been set before the pandemic hit Ontario in March, making it possible to focus on these long-term priorities while still responding on a daily basis to the unfolding COVID-19 crisis. Protecting the public interest continues to be at the forefront of our actions, and providing support to the membership so that they can continue to uphold their professional duties is a key part of that effort. The OAA quickly recognized the impact of the pandemic and responded with a series of strategies to help us all through this period. The OAA's executive committee, council, and staff promptly transitioned to working from their homes. Conference was canceled, and the Con Ed cycle and certificate of practice fee payment deadlines were extended. We leveraged online tools, moving a number of services to virtual platforms, including the AGM, Celebration of Excellence Awards, and launching a new and highly successful, I might add, webinar series. We all learned how to use Zoom and stay connected as best we could during these waves of uncertainty. We successfully launched a new visual identity and website, which alongside our e-newsletters and social media became even more essential to communication with our audiences, with things like our COVID-19 updates page becoming a critical site, ensuring relevant updates were shared in a timely manner. While the pandemic created many challenges and obstacles, we were determined to address our set priorities. The OAA remains committed to applying the lens of equity, diversity, and inclusion across its programs, priorities, and initiatives. Improving the accessibility to our profession was one of the reasons why I first ran for president back in 2018. Throughout the year, we received candid and constructive criticism on how to do better, both collectively and individually, to confront unconscious biases. In response, we hosted free webinars on topics like harassment in the workplace and addressing diversity, along with virtual roundtables on equity, diversity, and inclusion. The OAA held Indigenous cultural competency training for council, staff, and members of our reconciliation working group, while continuing important work on an environment survey of the profession. We also updated the OAA website to meet accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act standards and introduced closed captioning for webinars. As well, the OAA changed registration forms and standards of correspondence to remove prefixes of gender binary language. The goal has remained to ensure Ontario's diverse voices are represented in the profession. As leaders charged with protecting the public interest, architects must play a significant role in improving the environmental impacts of both existing and new buildings. The OAA remains vigilant in its efforts to promote climate stability, an issue I feel is one of the defining challenges of our time. We have been collaborating with experts in the field, integrating sustainability criteria into awards programs and other initiatives, and adding our voice to the call for climate action. Also, our renewed and refreshed OAA headquarters is more than offices and meeting spaces. It's a public and physical embodiment of an architect's skill and what is achievable in sustainable design. For OAA members, it is also your space, and I look forward to seeing you all at our grand public opening once we're safely able to do so. The OAA continued to focus on expanding knowledge of and within the profession in 2020. Our comprehensive education approach ensures students have the information they need to become great architects. It provides resources to members to augment their skills and expands outreach efforts to build the public awareness. For example, in response to the pandemic, we launched an online webinar series which ensured learning opportunities were more widely available to our members. This program has been highly successful and continues to expand. Also, our annual Queen's Park Pick events, celebrating and showcasing architectural landmarks nominated by MPPs from across Ontario, was reimaged as an online exhibition which gathered unprecedented public media and political attention. On that note, our social media numbers and engagement continue to see accelerated growth as well, an exciting indicator that our audiences are listening and engaged. Given that self-regulated professions continue to face increased scrutiny, I am happy to say that in addition to continuing to support legislation reflecting the public interest relative to the built environment, we installed a new registrar and deputy registrar, introduced a new governance committee, formalized succession planning, and improved transparency by allowing the public to see individual members and practices discipline history on the online members registry. Throughout the year, we've continued to find ways to engage the membership. However, we continue to hear feedback that some of you feel disconnected from the OAA. This signals that we must continue to work to find a balance between the membership services and our primary responsibility as the regulator of the profession. The privilege of self-regulation is only possible with the direct involvement of our members. That's you. The OAA continues to strive to increase participation while understanding the challenge inherent in achieving this goal. The pandemic has been a wake-up call to all of us. We all realize how our world can change overnight. Rather than focusing on the hardships we have all endured, I would like to suggest that this disruptor be used to ensure our profession becomes stronger. We need to embrace the learnings from this past year and continue to challenge our profession to not only respond to the exponential change that is coming, but to anticipate that change and lead the way. Change is difficult and often messy, sometimes painful, as is the design process. As those of us in the architectural profession, we know that the best solutions evolve as we push forward. It is critical that as a profession, we do the same. It has been an honor and a privilege to serve the membership as president for the past 2 years. And I'm confident the OAA is in good hands and able to meet the challenges that the future brings under the leadership of our new president, Susan Spiegel, our executive director, Christy Doyle, and our new registrar, Christy Mills. Thank you.
At the close of Katie's remarks, we're going to pause for a few moments. If there's any questions, I'm hoping people will post them in the chat. And I guess I'll put the music back on for the 30 seconds that we're waiting. Thank you so much, Katie. That was really inspiring. It's been a big year.
Well, Susan, I'm not seeing anything coming into the ask a question, so I think we can probably move on. If anybody adds something after the fact, we can circle back to it.
Okay, yep, that's great, thank you. So that was obviously a perfect speech, as there's no questions. The next item in our agenda is the presentation of the 2020 audited financial statements. I would like to move now to the presentation of the 2020 Auditor's Report and financial statements, which are attached to the 2020 annual report. As the past Senior Vice President and Treasurer, I will take a moment to address the meeting on finances for the past year. The formal report to the membership from the auditors is available alongside the annual report on the OAA website. In summary, Grant Thornton has conducted its audit of the financial statements of the OAA, which comprise a statement of financial position as November 30th, 2020, and the statement of operations for the year then ended. They have conducted their audit in accordance with the Canadian Generally Accepted Auditing Standards. Within their report, Grant Thornton has indicated that the audit evidence they have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for their audit opinion. In their opinion, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the Ontario Association of Architects as at November 30th, 2020, and the results of operations for the year then ended. At the risk of stating the obvious, 2020 was an incredibly exceptional year, and COVID did have an impact on the OA's overall budget, with meeting and travel costs being reduced to almost nil, while IT infrastructure and soft costs increased. Notwithstanding, the OA's finances continue to be well managed and our financial position remains solid. We have demonstrated that we are well positioned to address unimaginable events now and into our future, and I'm hopeful that everyone has reviewed the audited financial statement as posted on the website. However, I would like to make a few comments regarding items of specific note. The Examination for Architects in Canada, EXAC, process was deferred until 2021, meaning registration fees collected in the fiscal year 2020 will be counted for in 2021. The OAA conference obviously was canceled and thus generated no revenue, but also expenses were reduced accordingly. Con Ed related revenue increased significantly as members accessed the association's newly launched bi-weekly O&A webinar series. In-house offerings such as the admission course and the fundamentals of running an architectural practice were canceled, but the admission course continued to be offered online in partnership with U of T in Toronto, and work has begun to move the fundamentals of running an architectural practice online as well. Committee, council, and direct program expenses were significantly decreased as a result of the move to virtual activities. Nevertheless, membership to the OAA continues to grow. In 2020, we saw 267 newly licensed architects and 4 newly licensed technologists OAA, resulting in a slight increase in revenue. The association exited the 2020 fiscal year with a total members' equity at $42,495,676. It is important to note that 31 million of that equity is held within Pro-Dem, the insurance company, as its sole shareholder. The remainder of the members' equity is made up of 3 dedicated reserve funds: the depreciated value of capital assets and the unrestricted accumulated surplus. In 2020, 613,500 of the revenue surplus was redirected to internally restricted funds. 520,000 went to the major capital reserve. That's basically to top up what we use to build our fabulous new revised building. 83,500 went to an operating reserve, and 10,000 went to our legal reserve. And we made a lump sum payment of $270,000, the maximum we could make, onto our OAA mortgage, which financed our recent OAA headquarter renew and refresh. The use of these funds is restricted by the association's reserve fund policies and requires council approval for expenditure. The unrestricted members' equity, so this, in addition to the restricted funds, a further $2,916,310 remains as unrestricted members' equity, which can be used as an additional contingency to offset shortfalls resulting from unbudgeted expenditures or unanticipated revenue fluctuations. It is generally accepted and good practice for not-for-profit organizations such as the OA to accumulate surplus funds, such as we were just talking about, for operating purposes up to the equivalent of 1 year's operating expenses without jeopardizing their nonprofit status. In accordance with the OAA reserve fund policies, the total operating reserves are to be maintained at between 6 and 12 months of net operating costs. 12 months of operating costs for 2021 are estimated to be just over 7 million. To summarize 2020, I am pleased to report that with the careful, ongoing management of the fees you pay to the association, the OAA finances at the close of 2020 were well positioned for the future. Thank you. If there's any questions from the 220 audited financial statements, our auditors are available to answer any questions you have. So I'm going to wait a few moments while Christy monitors the question area, and she will read the questions as they come in. So we're pausing again for 30 seconds.
Susan, I am monitoring the questions coming in. I do note that there's a couple of questions that I think we'll handle under other business. I'll stay focused right now on any questions on the auditors and on our financial statements for now. But I do know that, just so everybody knows, I understand there's a couple of other questions that I'll make sure we tack on at the end of the meeting.
Okay. Anything in particular that has to do with the 2020 financial year? We have our wonderful accountant here to assist us.
Not at this point. So I think maybe we could move on to the next portion of the meeting. And again, I'll continue to watch it, but I don't have anything right now on the audited financial statement.
Thank you. Okay, so the financial outlook for 2021, moving forward from the 2020 financial year to our OAA 2021 finances, I would like to welcome this year's Senior Vice President and Treasurer, Agata Mancini, who will provide an update on this year's finances. Take it away, Agata.
Thank you, Susan. So after reviewing the second quarter financial report with the Executive Director, Christy Doyle, and our acting finance manager, Peter Manu, I can report that OA finances are tracking as expected. There's really not too many exciting things happening, but I'll just take a couple of minutes to go over some highlights and some items of note. So due to the uncertainty of last year, the budget for 2021 expected that by this time we would more than likely be having some in-person events and meetings, which obviously have not occurred. So because of that, there will be some savings in that regard due to the fact that there's no travel, meals, or hotel stays. There may be some in-person events closer to the end of the year, but that still remains to be seen. To date, the OA has collected about 97% of member fees, which due to the ongoing pandemic were not raised in 2021. In terms of conference, the final numbers of the virtual conference have not yet been completed as of now, though we do know there will be a bit of a deficit. This is not unexpected, partly because one of the priorities this year when we were planning the conference was to make it as accessible as possible to all of our OA members, to students, and to the public. So the decision to keep the conference fees as low as we could was based on the importance of that accessibility and the knowledge that other areas of the budget would likely see a surplus due to the ongoing gathering restrictions, as I mentioned before. So in addition to this, the budget committee also made a rather significant change last year in the way that funds are allocated for special committee initiatives. In previous years, each committee would request a certain amount of money based on planned or expected expenses and projects, but not all of these projects always occurred within that year, which often left a significant surplus in some areas, making it complicated to plan for the following year. Instead, the budget committee increased the council policy development contingency budget to $290,000 from the previous $175,000. So that when an initiative does go through, the committee brings it to council and requests funding at that time. So far this year, we've used just over $80,000 of that $290,000. Lastly, the mortgage for 111 Moatfield was recently approved by council to be moved from Scotiabank to CIBC. This lowered the interest rate from the previous 4.06 to 2.19, which should allow us to see a savings of just over $200,000 over the next 5 years. That's about all I have to say regarding the current finances. If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them as best I can. And if I'm unable to, then I can redirect to our knowledgeable staff and our auditor.
We're now waiting for questions.
Yeah, and Susan, I'll continue to monitor. I don't see anything coming in, so we can probably keep moving on. Again, what I don't answer, we'll tack on to the end.
Okay, so thank you very much, Agatha. And we will continue on with our wonderful speakers. I would now like to welcome the chair of the Pro-Indemnity Board, Joanne McCallum, who will provide a brief overview of Pro-Indemnity Insurance Company's activities over the past year. Joanne?
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody who's online to listen to our report on the 2020 activities of the Pro-Indemnity Insurance Company. As we all know, 2020 was certainly a notable year. Aside from dealing with a pandemic and supporting architects through our continued claims services, risk advice, and COVID-19 special bulletins, the company focused its efforts on laying the foundation for ongoing and continued success. We did a number of things. First, we worked to ensure our operations remained financially sustainable, achieving financial targets, while also taking steps to support practices such as waiving administration fees, increasing payment options, and suspending cancellations for non-payment. We fortified our operation capacity and capabilities, working to upgrade our processes, technology, skills, and capacity to be able to continue serving architects now and into the future. Thirdly, we are really working on setting strategic direction and defining some growth opportunities and confirming our commitment to all architects. And lastly, we began the process of creating a truly client-centric organization, putting the architectural practice at the heart of all we do. In addition to defining our purpose, ambition, and values, this work also focused on ensuring staff have the tools they need to best support architects. And as we retreated to virtual interactions, we worked to ensure we all stayed human and connected, building a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. As mentioned, we refined our purpose, ambition, and values last year. Purpose, what we intend to be, is to be the trusted ally to protect and defend the architectural profession and their families by strengthening and supporting their resiliency to the risks associated with practice. Ambition, what we are working at doing every day when we come to work, is to strive each day to be the authority on risk, resulting in financially sustainable practices that unleash the full potential of the profession to improve society and human interaction through better design. Our values support how we go about delivering our purpose and ambition. So let's look at 2020 at a glance. Despite the pandemic, a solid year of performance. Just over 1,500 clients, a slight increase from 2019, and there was no increase in the number of practices surrendering their certificate of practice. There was 14 million in total claims, of which 70% or 10 million was spent defending architects, and 4 million paid out in damages and settlements. The overall profit on the year of about 2 million. This was larger than 2019, which was 922,000 in profit. It is larger mostly due to some decreased costs, some due to the pandemic, a decline in reported claims in 2020, meaning the claims costs were flat compared to 2019, rather than being the 14.5 million that we had budgeted for. Part of our ongoing evolution is our intent to expand the risk education and risk services we offer. As a first step, we are currently asking all architects to complete a survey available on our website. And finally, our board of directors and our management team. This information is available on our website. I would really like to thank past directors Jamie Wright, Susan Spiegel, and Sarah Murray for their excellent work on the board. Also available online, you will find our annual report, where there's a great deal of information on our performance last year and our direction going forward. Thank you very much.
We'd like to provide you with an opportunity to offer council any additional comments or feedback on Joanne's wonderful presentation, Pro-Demnity. If you wish to, please enter your question and we will begin reading the questions in the order that they are submitted. If you have more questions than our time allows for, again, we will be responding with a post-meeting report citing the questions and preparing responses. Please note that any questions that are similar in nature are going to be grouped together, so they'll be addressed in one response. Any questions coming in fast and furious, Christy?
I'm just going to check the chat or the questions now, Susan, and I think if anybody has any questions for Joanne, we'll also field them now. But if everybody's ready, I think we'll just move to the questions. I do have a couple that have been brought forward, and
sure.
Maybe if you're okay, Susan, I'm going to jump to the first question.
Just to let people know, we've allocated 15 minutes for the question and answer portion of this meeting. So again, if we don't manage to get to your question, we will. Go ahead, Christy. Sorry, I'm an interrupter.
No worries, no worries. That's a good point. And actually, this first question that I have, it's quite a lengthy one, and I'm actually not going to read it because I understand that it also appeared in the chat. And so this is a question from Ottawa member Rick McEwen. And I hope, Rick, you don't mind. I'm not going to read the whole thing again because I know that it's in the chat. And really, Susan, this is a question about Rick's acknowledged what we've done in terms of helping members out in matters of business related to architecture, but has expressed some concern about how it contributed to the spread of COVID, and so in particular in long-term care homes. And so if I'll just jump to the meat of the question here is really Rick is asking about, will the OAA undertake to protect public and vulnerable residents of long-term care homes by advocating better practices and design standards? So Susan, do you want to take that question and let everybody know and update on what we're doing on the long-term care file and what we've done recently?
Yes, absolutely, because it's been quite an extensive exploration. And if I miss anything, please, Christy, jump in. We have had a long-term care roundtable with all of the large firms in Ontario who do almost exclusively long-term care work. And it was really important to hear from them because we were, in a way, hearing from the front lines of both sides, what's happening to the residents, what's happening to the staff, what's happening to the stakeholders, being like the government stakeholders. And it was a very, very enlightening roundtable. And we took extensive notes, and we did a report back to all the members of the roundtable to make sure that we had captured their important thoughts. And one of the things that was the most surprising was almost nobody talked about air. Mostly people talked about policy issues and funding issues. So what we have seen in this report is there are areas that we thought would be responded to that seem not to be as important to the groups who were at the long-term care roundtable. So we researched other groups to make sure that every single solitary item that would affect our best practices response to long-term care would be in our report. We are now just looking at a draft of that will be finalized into something that will be not only submitted to the membership and the public, but we will put it forward to your appropriate government officials where it will have an effect in assisting in best practices for long-term care. I know, just as a personal aside, starting to work with a number of seniors groups, that information that came out of the best practices was extremely informative. And I hope that it is the same for both the government and for the membership as we finalize this report. Christy, if I missed anything, please jump in.
No, I think that's good, Susan. I'm going to skip to another question, and maybe I'll toss this one over to Agatha. There was a question coming in from a member about what the remaining mortgage is on the OAA building. Agatha, are you able to give us that number?
Yeah, I believe we're at 4,555,000 if I'm correct. But that is the latest number.
Great. And that's right. So thank you, Agatha. Another question that I'm seeing here is a question from a member, Roland Mack, regarding our approach to meetings and events moving forward into the future. And I think what Roland's really asking about is whether we're going to go back to in-person meetings, or how we're going to adopt and or will we be using virtual type meetings in the future.
You know, this is a conversation and questions that everyone is asking. Everybody who, we're all still virtual, and all the webinars, everybody is talking about that as well. At the OAA conference, we did have webinars on that very issue, and no one has a crystal ball. So we don't know what's going to happen in the world of the pandemic. The statistics are looking very good. Toronto is reopening cautiously, and the rest of Ontario, there's some very difficult hotspots that we're all very concerned about. And I think as safety and science and policy and the government and good sense advises us, we will probably move towards some kind of hybrid model. But we have had so much fantastic response to having online events. This AGM, which would have been maybe attended by 100 people, was attended by 500 last year. I don't know the numbers this year, but it's made it incredibly accessible to everybody. You can keep working and have us on a side camera, listen to what you want. It's kind of fantastic that way. The same with our Con-Ed webinars. I mean, we all know the benefits. We also know the downsides. And so because we have this wonderful building, and when there's wonderful people that you want to meet and see face to face, we are hoping by our next conference to be able to do a hybrid model and use our building, which is very large and very airy. We'll be able to have a certain number of people there to, start seeing one another in person again. I don't know.
Thank you, Susan, for that. I'm actually I'm just gonna keep monitoring here in terms of the questions, but I think perhaps what we could do is we'll switch back. I will introduce you for your president's address and move forward into that last bit of the meeting in terms of your president's address.
Thank you. This address is an appreciation of all the hard work of the OAA staff, council members, and to OAA members for the great work in a demanding time. As we survey the last 15 months, we are seeing lessons learned and positive shifts that allow us to reckon our time in the global pandemic. The big pause. Insight and lessons are being explored across all media. And while I imagine there are countless ways that we are each personally affected by COVID, I want to reflect on what we in the architecture profession can turn our attention to. At the beginning of this year, the OAA Council renewed its commitment to viewing our work through a vigilant lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, as spearheaded by our wonderful and now past president, Katie Curtin. We drilled down and iterated in 3 key areas, the 3 Ps: the people, the profession, and the planet. And I want to talk about each of those plus one other category. So, the people. The last several months has laid bare deep-rooted disparities. We continue to confront inequities and unconscious biases as individuals, in our communities, in our professions, in our built environment, and that have been largely invisible on too many fronts for too long. Just over a year ago, a powerful global movement began loudly calling out anti-Black racism. COVID devastated our elders and care workers in retirement communities and essential workplaces. Precariously housed people have been relegated to makeshift encampments in city parks. And right now, I join Indigenous people across Canada who grieve for the children murdered and buried without dignity at the Kamloops Indian Residential School and other sites across the country. As much as I am frightened by the intentionality of these crimes, I do stand in awe, and this is written by somebody else who also stands in awe. I stand in awe of the intergenerational survivors who promote hope and love as they lead our country towards justice and reconciliation. So there's much work to be done. Architects and licensed technologists, OAA, have a key role to play in designing for health and well-being, accessibility, fairness, and inclusivity. The OAA remains committed to continuing this important work in all actions and initiatives. I'm very glad to say that this commitment has translated into concrete, actionable steps forward. This year, the OAA introduced Con Ed mandatory requirements to ensure ongoing learning around inclusivity in the profession. The OAA's Reconciliation Working Group continues to address how the practice of architecture and space and land development and landscape can be decolonized. We have just concluded a demographic survey on the profession to help determine a baseline to measure proactive change as we continue to learn and unlearn. Our first virtual conference 2021 was hosted under the theme of Cultivate Inclusivity, and by all reports, it was a tremendous success. It was kicked off with a keynote presentation by Ojibwe broadcaster, advocate, and pop culture philosopher Jesse Wente, whose brilliant and engaging talk was noted by some as life-changing. The full conference was made available for a highly reduced price to ensure more interns, members, and the public could participate. It featured topics of inclusive design, sustainable practices, architecture and indigeneity, accessibility, and more. The energy around the event was fantastic, and I hope it will move members to think and act with renewed perspective in their own practices. I want to underscore that this work is not done to pay lip service or to earn favor with particular communities. It is driven by the ongoing convictions of the members of council who know that our profession is better when it reflects the diversity of the people in Canada and the province of Ontario and the world, and who understand that in order to uphold our mandate to protect the public interest, this work must get done. I echo the inspiring words spoken by our past president, Kathleen Curtin, at the 2020 AGM. As a regulator, our role is to advocate for the public interest rather than for members. It is something that is very often misunderstood by the profession. Those who sit on council, including myself as president, are there to represent the interests of the general public rather than our peers and colleagues. Of course, issues that are in the public interest are often also beneficial to the profession. After all, having a strong network of highly trained, well-informed architectural professionals supported with the right tools and resources leads to the OAA's vision of a safe and healthy built environment and performs at the highest levels and elevates the human spirit. Key area number 2, the profession. There are a number of actions the OAA is taking to support the profession. Member engagement and comprehensive education continue to be a key focal point for council directives, which have taken shape in several ways. COVID has accelerated embracing the advantages of online tools and integrating them fully into our processes. OAA staff and council have been working remotely without skipping a beat. We've expanded a highly successful Con Ed webinar series, including a selection of sessions about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which are free and count towards structured learning hours. Plus, the OAA Council approved the Canadian Architectural Certification Board, CACB Standing Committee's recommendation to proceed with an online, broadly experienced foreign architect interview process, that's BIFA, as a permanent option under that program. No more Uber taxi driving architects. As I mentioned earlier, the OAA conference was successfully hosted virtually this year. And of course, so was this year's AGM. And so many more people can attend because it's online and accessible. And we expect these new approaches to endure. In celebration of the unique strengths of our profession, the design challenge this year, Shift 2020, is Resiliency Architecture Challenge. This aspirational and inspirational program highlights how architectural thinking can respond to key social issues. This year, the diverse jury of experts selected 5 projects that thoughtfully responded to the issue of resiliency. 5 selections were celebrated with a special preview event at the conference, which can be viewed on our OAA's own YouTube channel. And further events expanding these projects are forthcoming. Our practice advisory services team has been working on revising and updating OAA contracts, to which I have to say, yay. After a year of negotiations, I'm also happy to report that the OAA has secured free viewing access for licensed members to the CSA standards referenced in the National Building Code and the Ontario Building Code. In upholding our mission to serve the public interest, the OAA is providing access to this important information so that costs are not a barrier to being well informed. A 1-year subscription began on June 1st. Interested architects and licensed technologists, OAA, should register as soon as possible under resources on our website. Key area 3, the planet. While we grapple actively with the COVID aftermath, and I'm calling that very hopefully, we remain vigilant in our efforts to respond to the climate crisis. The OAA believes that resilient, climate stable architecture can no longer be an aspiration or a specialty. It must be the standard expectation for all our buildings. We've introduced mandatory energy use intensity criteria into our Design Excellence Award requirements. And to facilitate finding that information, the OAA launched a new online tool to allow its members and the public to measure total energy use intensity, that's the TEUI, of a building. And it's fantastic. Initiated in 2020 by the OAA Sustainable Built Environment Committee, that's SBEC, the free TEUI.ca calculator, it lets you determine a home or building's energy performance by entering really simple data into a very easy to use interface. Users receive instant metrics for their building's energy performance and get a PDF printout to show clients and other stakeholders. The OAA also joined Workforce 2030, a coalition of industry groups to help fast track the skills and occupations needed to build a new low carbon Ontario. As part of conference, we hosted a plenary panel discussion on investing in carbon-free design. It shone a spotlight on the critical need for low and zero carbon buildings to address climate change crisis. The speakers made a compelling case to embrace net zero carbon building design as a sound investment strategy, both from an environmental and an economic perspective. And soon we will gather at the renewed OAA headquarters, which embodies the possibilities in sustainable design, 2030 goals achieved 10 years early. Our unique skills and knowledge are required to create safe and resilient built environment that responds to the needs of the new normal. As we come together to create our future, we must meet the climate crisis with thoughtful solutions for new and existing buildings alike. This is key area 4 that doesn't start with a P, but it's called operations. Operations are the final phase in a very large and total revitalization program the OAA started with our building, our new branding strategy, and our new website. We've now turned our focus to OAA operations. The support of the Governance Committee and Council, a review of the OAA operations is being conducted now with the overarching goal to review and ensure that the association is equipped, organized, resourced, and administered in an optimal manner in order to support the legislative mandate of the OAA, along with the vision, mission, and mandate and strategic objectives of the OAA and Council. Our consulting firm, Gina Virgilio and Associates oversaw the review and presented their draft findings to the project team on May 11th, and with the final report with comprehensive recommendations being submitted at the end of June. Next steps. We find ourselves on the cusp of a more normal summer. Let's use this hopeful energy to energize and invigorate our approach to our work. Moving forward, many people working from home. We've all heard we got to know our neighbors, which was fantastic. But I think people mostly got to know themselves, connecting with a deeper sense of themselves and contributing, thinking of contributing to the planet, not just taking from it. To share wisdom from Jesse Wente's videos, diversity and inclusion is the way of nature. Reforestation, the same trees planted in a grid, was not designed by nature. Design like a forest. Plant so people you will never know will enjoy the shade. Thank you. So we do have some questions about the intern survey and the title change, and I'm going to try and respond to that. And if Agatha or somebody would like to jump in, if I forget something, please do. There was a survey conducted in late 2020 that gathered feedback from the membership as a whole regarding the title change and preferred titles. We presented that survey to council, and basically, I mean, it wasn't the number of people who responded all agreed, but not enough people responded to have what we thought was a groundswell of support. And council, in their discussion and their wisdom, felt that it would be really important to do a little more background research to understand what people are doing across Canada, what all our other associations are doing. And so we'll have a groundswell of support for a name that will go all across Canada to know what the United States is doing and what other places in the world are doing, so that the title has more substance. The other thing that we understood by our conversation was that there's really endemic problems in being an intern. And in a way, the title change doesn't necessarily represent that. Interns have to be paid properly. They have to have a proper work situation. They can't go on forever being interns. There's a number of issues that we have to deal with and really look at very seriously. And we felt that out of understanding the deeper problems and issues and challenges that interns face, we would be able to come up with an appropriate title, all of us. So that's my understanding of where we are on that issue. We're working on it, and we agree that it has to happen. It's not the perfect moment. Agatha.
Yeah, no, you've said it really well. So the interns committee has taken that back, and they are putting together a more fulsome report to council to direct them on next steps and what might be the best approach for that, taking those things into consideration.
But we are taking it very seriously. I mean, a title change is not a small thing. You don't want to make a mistake and then have to change it the next year as well. So we are taking this very seriously.
Thank you, Susan. I'm just looking at the chat. I don't have any new questions coming in. I know that there was 2 small follow-up questions, and I believe that our manager of communications, Eric Misio, has actually posted something in the chat. So hopefully that that was done and those follow-up questions were answered. Yeah, at this point, I don't have any other questions coming in. All of our business is concluded. So I think we can go to your last point on the for the day.
Okay, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Okay, and we have that prearranged, Susan, and seeing that there's no other business, I'm just going to indicate that Gordon Hunt from Toronto and Paula Hamilton from Puslinch has agreed to move and second that motion to adjourn. So again, given that there's no other business, we're going to close the meeting. We don't have an official poll to for everybody to vote, because I think we're going to scroll through the newly licensed members again. And back to you, Susan.
Okay, so this meeting which didn't go till 4:30, 4:11, is now officially adjourned. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today at the OAA AGM.